Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Jane the Virgin, Season 1, Episode 16, Chapter 16. In this episode, well, it turns out that there is another ex that we're going to have to deal with. This is Michael's ex, and I want to know what she wants. Also, we have a whole thing with writer's block being like a symbol for a block in a relationship and yada, yada, yada. But in the end, there's a kind of talk that I really appreciated. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Lauren for commissioning this episode. What's up, Lauren? I just want to throw a shout out to Lauren, to Natalia, to, I think, Rowan, have you commissioned a couple episodes? There's been, I think, 4 people in total who have commissioned episodes. Forgive me for not remembering everybody's names. And I really enjoy like the quick pace that I've been able to cover the show in. Claire is another person. Thank you, Claire. Because, you know, it's a very intricate plot. There's a lot of moving parts, and I feel like it would be very easy to sort of lose track of some things if there were too much of a gap. That's not to say that if there were a gap, there'd be a major problem. But, sometimes, you know, I'll ask people if they are interested in me covering something for Spoil Me, and they express interest, but then the commissions don't really happen. And I don't blame anybody for that in particular. Things, you know, sometimes you're all about it and think you have the money, and then you fucking flat tire and that cleans you out. But I'm just really excited that, like, as soon as Jane the Virgin dropped as an option to commission, those commissions came in at a very steady clip and remain very steady. And it's just very exciting, especially considering it's a long show. And I am hoping that, like, you know, I actually get to the end of the show. There's no guarantees, but I always enjoy being able to, like, immediately watch the next episode of something because I'm not worried about a long wait before the next time I get to record on it. So I just wanted to say thank you to all you guys for figuring this out. And there are times when I just desperately want to peek into the fucking, like, spoiler chat on Discord. Oh my God, you guys, it's so tempting. I don't do it. I have never done it, ever. But I've thought about it. I've thought about it a lot of times. So many times. There has been one time where I accidentally clicked on a spoiler chat instead of the no spoiler chat. And I can't even remember what it was for. But I very quickly realized my mistake based on, like, a half spoiler and bounced the fuck up out of there. Anyway, okay, so this episode, I'm gonna start off with this. This episode is the one where Alba's a cunt. What the fuck, Alba? What are you doing? I really like you most of the time, Christian fundamentalism notwithstanding. I can appreciate that you have a different belief system than me and respect that, and respect the fact that you got Jane to follow in your footsteps with that. I have my thoughts about indoctrinating children with certain ideas, but that's just the way society is. So what are you going to do? And I will let it go when I don't agree with a thing or feel like you're being slut-shamey or whatever. But this episode really took it to another level for me. Now we're not talking about, like, it first, let me just start things off with, there's a conversation between Zoe and Rogelio where he's asking how her mother reacted to her announcing that she is going to be moving out. And she says, my mom took it surprisingly well. And we go to a very quick cutaway scene of her telling Alba, and Alba is in the middle of, like, collecting laundry and just says, okay, well, let me know when that's going to happen, and is extremely chill and relaxed about it. And Zoe is taken very off guard because she had expected her mother to get upset, and instead gets an almost non-reaction, which she seems kind of excited about. The fact that her mother is presenting so little obstacle to her is a huge relief. And then we have her actually like packing her things up in her room, getting all of her clothes together. And she's sorting through stuff. I love that she's like about to take a bunch of Jane's clothes. And Alba comes in and is like, what are you doing? And she says, I'm packing. And her mom is like, what are you talking about? And she says, I told you I'm moving in with Rogelio. And her mother is like, she says, I told you about this. You don't remember? And her mother says, you make all kinds of claims all the time and you don't follow up on them. So I just assumed this wasn't happening. Call it off. And starts to just walk out of the room. I cannot express to you how this hit for me in particular in a very personal way, because looking back, I can sort of understand now why things went with me the way they did. But I had a really difficult time as somebody who was like very creative and a performer, but also did visual arts and, a lot of different things like that were creative, but didn't necessarily fit into a good career path. I had a hard time picking out what I was going to major in school. And I started off choosing a major based on what I was going to get a scholarship for, which technical theater, for those who are interested, it's not a hugely popular major to choose, and it will get your foot in the door in a lot of places. So I went with that because I was a poor and knew that I was going to need a scholarship to help me out. And doing that got me a half tuition 4-year scholarship at Carnegie Mellon. However, after the first year there, which was an absolute fucking nightmare, I hated it. I took a year off. I did an abroad program through another college. And then I was like, maybe I'm going to change majors. Maybe I'll do musical theater instead. I went to school for musical theater for 1 year and was like, this isn't it either. Nope. I hate it. I hate the people. I hate the music. I don't like any of this. And at that point, looked into getting into culinary school. And at this point, I asked my father if he would co-sign a student loan for me to go to pastry and baking school. And he said no, because you never finish anything. Now, he wasn't wrong, but that's a really shitty thing to say to your kid. It's just hugely unsupportive. It shows how little he really understood me or what it was I was trying to figure out. And it felt very much like you picked something and now you have to stick with it to the end, whether you have any interest in pursuing that as a career, which feels to me like a massive waste of money. Like, no, I shouldn't finish something that I'm not interested in when it's costing us $20,000 a year for me to go to that school. I had half scholarship. That was an expensive fucking school. So even with half scholarship, that was a massive amount of money. Why would I finish it? That's not smart, And it's the exact sort of thing nowadays that kids get blamed for. Oh, you went to school for the wrong thing. You should have majored in business. But at the time that I was going to college, we were told to pursue our dreams. So I was really like hurt by the fact that he had no apparent interest in helping me figure out what I wanted to do, and no belief that I would ever really find a thing that I would finish because it was the right thing. And it stuck with me for a long time that he just dismissed me so easily and didn't take anything that I took interest in seriously because of the fact that I hadn't chosen to finish things in the past. I was a fucking teen. When I asked him to like co-sign that student loan, I think I was 20, maybe 19. I was very young. And to put it on me that like I didn't finish anything at that age, that's the exact age where you want to be trying things out and sort of experimenting. So what I find wild here is the fact that Zoe, it says in the last episode, Zoe decided to ask Rogelio something she had never asked a man. Do you want to move in together? And the fact that Alba is saying, you always say you're going to do things and then you don't. When has she said she's going to move in with a guy before? When has this particular thing been something that she has mentioned? And you are like, her whole feeling of frustration here is that Zoe has ruined the relationship because if she wants Rogelio to marry her, he has no reason to do so if they're sleeping together already. She even says, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free? Which is such an incredibly belittling phrase. That is the sort of thing that is, it's like dehumanizing on so many different levels. It's dehumanizing to the woman, but also to the man in the scenario. And it's really gross to like for her to sort of accuse Rogelio of being that type. And I'm sure she's not thinking of it like that. And I'm sure that if Rogelio were there, that she would try and say, like, I don't think that you're consciously like that or on purpose, but men are in general like that. I think that she would like add a bunch of qualifiers to it. But the thing is, if you have to add a million qualifiers, like maybe don't say it. And the fact that she is so sure, this is the sort of thing that, If Zoe has never moved in with a man before, this is a major step for her that is unprecedented and deserves a lot more support. And she's behaving as if Zoe has like moved in with dudes all over the place and tried this out a million times and it never works out, which is demonstrably not what her history entails. This is a commitment, and maybe it's not the kind of commitment that she is hoping for. She wants an actual wedding, but it's a much bigger commitment than Zoe has had with a guy ever since fucking the guy that apparently Jane liked when she was a kid that they broke up. Jonathan, I think was his name. So I really was super disappointed in her attitude. I hated the call it off and then walking out of the room with this dismissive, I run you sort of attitude. Yeah, you're her mother, but she's a grown-ass woman. I mean, how old is she supposed to be? Like around 40, I think? This is not an age where you get that kind of say anymore. And I think you know that. And it's wild that you think you can just begin to like pull a power play like that now because of what she's doing. The context doesn't matter. This is not your call. And it's so, her lack of trust and faith in her daughter's ability to make this decision is insulting. That's just straight up what it is. It's really insulting. And it's like so upsetting after seeing how well this little household has gotten together mostly. to watch Alba just like try and hold this over Zoe's head when she knows that Zoe doesn't buy into her beliefs. And also later on at the end of the episode, she walks by Zoe in the hall and just puts her nose in the air and acts like she doesn't see her. That is so childish. That is, for me, like the reason to move out. If she's trying to get Zoe to see her point of view, that's the exact wrong way to do it. And I would be packing my shit that moment to get out even earlier than I said, so that I don't have to be around that kind of energy, because that's hateful and gross and immature and shitty. So it's really such a bummer, because I like Alba a lot most of the time. And she has managed to like have her beliefs, but keep it, not necessarily keep it to herself, but she says her piece and then she sort of lets it go with Jane. Because she knows that Jane sees things the same way that she does, and therefore she trusts Jane's ability to make decisions. And clearly she has no trust in Shamara. And that sucks. That really sucks to know. And I really feel for Shamara, especially when her mom just walks by her and doesn't look at her. The way she stops and turns and watches her walk away. You can see how hurt she is and how disappointed. This is a big deal. She's moving in with a guy. It's been decades. She's never done this. It's the father of her child and somebody that she has really grown to care about. This is very, very big. And her mother doesn't see it because she has her benchmarks that she judges everything by. And that's the only thing that matters to her. And that's just such a disappointment. So anyway, I just had to like get that out of the way immediately, because I am rooting for Zoe and I'm really concerned because her mother says something about how she'll be back within a month. And Zoe says, no, I won't. I'm worried that if things don't work out with her and Rogelio, that she is going to cling to a relationship that's not working, toxic or falling apart, just to prove something to her mom. When I completely understand that impulse, but also that's the wrong reason to do anything. Anytime that you're doing something to sort of prove another person wrong, you're focused on the wrong thing. That's the wrong motivation. It just shouldn't come from that place. That's not going to work long term. So I'm kind of concerned that this is going to become a thing where she's trying to just prove her mom wrong. And also in the midst of this argument that she's having with Alba, Jane keeps like trying to butt in and like ameliorate her mother's statements. And I really resented that. Let her fucking have her argument. And so what if she pisses your grandmother off? This is between them. This is none of your business. Stop it. And also, your grandmother's firmly in the wrong. And I am bummed that you don't see that and that you're trying to soften things for her sake. It's not fair of you to sort of like, I just didn't like that. At one point, she says something like this. Zoe says something like, this is my decision. You don't get a say. And then Jane chimes in with not that she doesn't respect your opinion is of course what I think she means. What are you doing here, Jane? Stop, go away. This is really like just so toxic of you to insert yourself into this. And the fact that she doesn't see how wrong her grandmother is. Alba calls her stupid. Honestly, for me, that's the end of the conversation. My mom says that I'm being stupid and I'm done and I walk away. And I appreciated that Zoe mentions more than once that she said that and that her mother doesn't apologize for that and doesn't see that name calling to your child is low-key unforgivable, it was genuinely kind of shocking to me. And I was very bothered by the fact that Jane doesn't seem to stop and think about that either. Sorry, Rowan says, my mother literally said that to me once. I don't know, Mom, maybe because I'm not a fucking cow, right? And honestly, why would I want to marry someone who saw me as livestock or our relationship as transactional? That's the thing. When people talk about things in those terms, they're acting like, well, why would they want to marry you if they're already getting that feature? If that's what marriage is to you, that's very much like your baggage. If that's how you see a healthy relationship that's going to work long term, you need to go to therapy and talk that out, because that's not what a partnership between two mutually respectful adults looks like. Men marrying women because they want to get something out of them is how we got where we are in the present, with women who are in the workplace and also expected to do all of the work at home, because men still see us as servants in a lot of ways. Like, we are going to be housekeepers and sexual partners. We should be pushing back on that sort of mentality as much as possible. But of course, Alba's not going to see any of that because she's super traditional, and that's what she thinks a woman's role is in a marriage. So anyway, it surprised me how upset I got, because we have seen Alba be disapproving before, but it has never been this cruel feeling and this dismissive and patronizing. I was really struck by how upset it made me to see this conflict between the two of them. And Zoe is so excited and so like effervescent, and then it drains right out of her. And this is such a big deal, and her mom fucking ruined it. You know, bummed me the fuck out, kids. So, okay. Now we're going to talk about this scene in the opening where Jane is sitting across from Raphael, and they're having breakfast, and she's trying to explain to him about a tour of the hospital that's going to be coming up. I don't know what this is about. I'm assuming like this is a sort of standard thing, but I've never heard of this. And he is on his phone, constantly texting and not paying attention to her. And later on, when she brings this up again, like, he says something like, that's work, Jane. That's life. It's not all rainbows and sunshine or something. And she says, I know. And he says, do you? And I was like, the fuck did you just say to her? Pretty boy millionaire? Did you just ask the worked since she was able to because she had to woman who got accidentally, artificially inseminated? Did you just ask her if she knows that life's no picnic? Are you fucking kidding me? I was so livid, you guys. His whole attitude. And she rightfully is like, ever since the proposal, because it's obvious his attitude has shifted because of that. And he gets all pissy about her bringing it up. But finally, they have a bit of a confrontation, which I loved so much. He says something about how I have the right to be hurt. And she says, yeah, you know what? So do I. Because if you had talked to anybody who actually knew me, you would know it was too soon. But you didn't think this through at all. You just went ahead with it way too fast. And I am sick of having to coddle your feelings. I didn't put us in this situation, and I'm sick of you putting it on me. So you know what? Fucking figure it out. And I wanted to applaud. I really did. She was just so right in that scene. And he winds up having a talk with Petra where he asks her, you know, I proposed to you after we were dating for 5 months. Did that seem too fast? And she was like, I mean, it was fast, but it made sense because of how important it was for you to have a family. And he says this to Jane later, which is sort of like not exactly what I was theorizing about him, but it was on the same track where I was thinking like, clearly he wanted to have a sort of like, you know, little white house with a picket fence, cat and a dog in the yard. He was after that and he was pushing for it too quick. And he tells Jane, I was trying to lock it down so that you wouldn't leave. To which she's like, I'm not leaving. That is the point. So I liked that he had some self-reflection and really like took a moment to understand that this is a pattern for him. And that, yeah, maybe him being shitty to Jane is more about unexpectedly not getting exactly what he wanted when he's kind of used to getting exactly what he wants most of the time. And he has a scene later with Petra where he tells her, you're right, you do know me. I appreciate you telling me that stuff. It's going to help with Jane. And she watches him walk away with a sort of expression on her face like, I am glad to have helped you, but I don't want it to help with Jane. There's a whole thing with him and her having to watch a dog, and the person who hands them the dog tells them that this is David Bisbal's dog, and it is not. It is her dog, and she lied because she knew that they would take better care of him if it was thought to be the celebrity's dog. That woman is so obnoxious, by the way. But him and Petra sort of like wind up bonding through this shared experience of dealing with this runaway dog. And I think the show is starting to like play around with a feeling of more reconciliation between them that might teeter on the edge of, oh my God, are they going to want to get back together? Which I will just say right now, I'm going to have absolutely no tolerance for whatsoever. There is a point at which you just can't go back. And lying that he punched you to get money out of him, for me, that's the line. You don't get to get him back, and he doesn't get to want you back. So if that is going to be a thing, just know right now that I am just going to dismiss it out of hand and not want that in any sense. Now, could that change? It might. But as of right now, I don't see it. And there is also, I thought that this was going to wind up being like a little bit more of a thing, but we don't actually see anything with Lachlan this episode. I thought that was going to come up as more of a, maybe him trying to sabotage things. I don't know what I was expecting. But yeah, he isn't in this episode at all, I don't think. So, all right. Let's go to Jane and her writer's block. She is writing about a woman who is knocking on a door. Nobody's answering. She opens the door, and when she opened it, much to her surprise, she saw, and Jane cannot come up with another, like, the next line. She doesn't know what this woman saw. And she's really kind of, like, frustrated by this. And this is the sort of thing that, like, I've mentioned before how I am trying to, like, get my shit together to write a book. I've written books before, and I have not. There was one that I feel particularly, like, was a good, solid story that was well done and kind of heart-wrenching. But it was supposed to be part of an overall thing that I completely scrapped. So now that story is like low-key scrapped. And I otherwise don't have great organization in my head of what it is I'm trying to write. So this whole thing here is like just so understandable to me. Getting to a certain point and then genuinely having no idea where you want to go with it. And it's part of why I don't start, is because I am preemptively afraid of these moments. And her and Michael wind up at the same Cubano truck where those people mistakenly think that her and him are a couple, and it's still a couple, and they think she's pregnant with his baby, and she has to explain that is not the case, and it's super awkward. But when she walks away, one of the women sticks her head out and is like, "Oh, Michael, did Jane leave already? I wanted to give her this like flyer because there is going to be a writer's workshop hosted by this romance writer that we both like." And he gives her the flyer later, and she's genuinely like, this is fate. I was just thinking I need some sort of workshop, and I am definitely going to go to this. Thank you. But she doesn't read the back of the flyer, which has a specific like detailing of how one is meant to write these compliment cards. So she goes to the writing workshop that's like, it's being held in like a cafe or something, I guess. What is this actress's name? I'm wanting to say Olivia Wilde. That's not right. Olivia Wilde is the younger woman who directed Don't Worry, Darling. I can't remember this actress's name, but she is somebody that Owen has had a crush on. When she showed up on screen, he literally said, "Oh shit." And she is sort of like the person running things, and she has written a well-known romance novel called Under the Bridge. So Jane is at this thing, and it's a very cute, like, little group of people. I'm looking forward to seeing what can come of this. And a girl comes and sits down next to her, who we find out later is Michael's ex-girlfriend. The girl that he was seeing before he met Jane. I'm assuming that their relationship did not end because of Jane, but I may be wrong about that. Because she says, "I haven't seen you in 3 years," and him and Jane have been together too. So I think things had been over. What is her name? Is it Anna? I can't remember. But I am wondering if she's actually interested in this group, or if she's here to sort of like keep an eye on Jane, or not even keep an eye on, but just sort of like feel her out, because there is an understandable curiosity about who your ex-partner was involved with other than you. It's a really understandable impulse. It's not something that I would explore because I get so in my head about that sort of thing that I think it would just do me no good. But I will admit that, like, when Brendan and I split up and I found out that he was already engaged, Brendan proposed to this girl, I think like 5 months after we had split up, and we weren't even divorced yet. And they got married within the year. It was fast. And I was like, okay, who is this person? And I looked into her online because of course I did. I just wanted to know. And she seemed really cool. Like one of those things where I'm just like, I can't even be mad. She seems awesome. She's like, involved in like social justice nonprofits as her career, and very just accomplished. And I was like, okay, I see it. But after looking into her, I started to have actual nightmares that I was running into the two of them in Philadelphia, that I was like walking on the street and that I encountered them together as a couple and desperately wanted her to like me and approve of me. And so the dream was this like anxiety dream of me trying to sort of impress her. And it was just, it wedged in my brain. So I'm just saying that this girl being here, if she is just kind of curious about Jane, I would understand. I don't know if I'm assuming she knows Jane and Michael are no longer a thing, and that's why she is appearing on the scene as well. But because Jane at one point says something about how her boyfriend owns the Marbella in front of this girl. So I'm thinking that she's aware. Or maybe it is just total coincidence because she is similar to Jane in being into romance and wanting to write, and Michael has a type, and they are both kind of that type. That would also make sense. But anyway, what happens is that they have to pass in compliment cards in this writer group to tell someone what they liked about their story and be kind. So it's sort of bombing them with compliments before getting critiqued. And that way they get buoyed up in their confidence, and the things that people say to them afterward don't feel quite so harsh because there have been so many positive things said first. This is the sort of thing that I don't think would work for me at all, because I have a really hard time accepting and believing in compliments of certain types. And if I know that this card is a mandatory thing, I am not going to take anything anybody says on this card seriously. It's just going to feel forced and fake, and I'm not going to believe it. And on the flip side of that, then we get to, do you believe the negative things? And of course I do. I will believe that before anything else. Like, that's just how my stupid ass brain works. It's part of why I don't read reviews anymore, because, like, why would I do that to myself at this point? And so, like, I kept thinking about this, just like, oh man, I don't think this would fucking do me any good. But Jane doesn't realize it's just supposed to be a compliment bomb. So she is, I wouldn't even say she's harsh. She's just very honest and says, I don't feel the affection between these two characters. They seem better off without each other. And the woman reads this and bursts into tears. And Jane is so embarrassed, and she has to explain why she shouldn't be kicked out of the group. And when she speaks to this woman the next day, the woman explains that the reason I took it so hard was not because of the attack on my writing. It was because I was writing a couple that mirrors me and my husband, and what you said was accurate to how our relationship is. Which, that is really rough. That is a really rough, like, have you ever had this happen? And not necessarily from your writing, but have you ever been, like, watching a relationship on screen, for example, and thought, oh my God, this is just like me and so. And it's only because of that you begin to, like, spot some real problems, actually, that you didn't really notice or chose to ignore. I had this happen with there was a scene with somebody who she gets proposed to, and she's really excited. And then she goes to see him the next morning, and he doesn't remember proposing because he was so drunk when he did it that it doesn't even really feel like it happened. Like, it's essentially like it didn't happen. And she had known he had a drinking problem, but she had never realized how bad it was. And the fact that she is so humiliated about talking how excited she is for the wedding, and he has no idea what she's even referencing, that was really similar to something that happened to me when I was seeing a person who had a drinking problem that I didn't want to face. And we would have whole conversations, and the next day he wouldn't remember. And this moment in the show, for some reason, that was when it clicked. Oh, this is just not healthy. This is bad. And I just started sobbing after watching this scene, and, like, wound up dumping him and never speaking to him again. And it was so weird. I was, like, clinging to this desperately. And for some reason, seeing it played out in front of me with other people was what I needed to truly just let go of it. And the thing is, here, this woman is talking to Jane, and she says there's no romance left. And immediately the whole romance writers group chimes in about how don't say that, there's always a way to fix things, which I just don't agree with, but I appreciate the narrator saying it's a romance writers group. What did you expect them to say? I was like, oh yeah, fair. I appreciate you calling me out on that, because I was definitely sort of side-eyeing this entire thing. And everyone makes suggestions about her making a big romantic gesture. And I'm not saying that women shouldn't make romantic gestures, but I am saying, in my experience of the world, it is always the women who are trying to fix this sort of thing. And I really, really want to see more men take responsibility for relationships turning out like this. It's just kind of, but so that's my baggage that I'm sort of bringing to this like story. And later on, Jane spots this lady in the crowd at Caiocho, and she is kissing what we think is her husband, because Jane offered to get Raphael to give them a suite for the evening to sort of like rekindle things. I don't even know if it might be for the whole weekend. I hope it was, because there was a part of me that was sort of like, what if that's not her husband? But, I'm not saying that things can't be like resuscitated or revived and worked out. It's just, having been through a marriage that really went downhill, I have a bit of bitterness about it. And I feel like that's playing into this a lot for me. So the whole thing with Caiocho is like Jane's sort of, she fell in love with salsa, and it is a very like romantic type of dancing. And this thing, it's like a street festival with musicians and food and the whole thing. It's a big tradition. And she has a memory of like going with her mother and her grandmother, and it being a really, one of those experiences that just lives in your heart, one of those memories that you just always, it's like a fundamental cornerstone of your childhood kind of experiences. And she has a really hard time, because after her mom and her abuela get in this fight, they're at Caiocho later, and Alba doesn't come, which again, truly so immature. I mean, I'm so disappointed in her. I am going to need her to really apologize in a major way for me to get past this, because otherwise I'm going to kind of hold this against her for a minute. But she has this moment because she's struggling with everything with Raphael, where she imagines him showing up and the two of them like dancing together, and there's this big like group number, which was pretty fun. I did enjoy Michael and Rogelio dancing together. So now that we're here, let's talk about Michael and Rogelio. First of all, we have a scene where Rogelio comes to sort of yell at Raphael. He shows up and he is fully expecting an apology, which it turns out is not what he's going to get, because Raphael just wants him to introduce him to David Bisbal. And it turns out that Rogelio is very upset that Raphael didn't come to him to ask his permission to propose. And I was so curious about what Jane would think of this, because Jane is very traditional, so it would be possible that she'd have no issue with this at all. It was also possible that she would be like, Rogelio, why do you think you deserve to be asked? You haven't been part of my life until very recently. What are you talking about? Or even just like, I'm not a piece of property that he needs to ask your permission for in general, because that's just not the way things work. Either way, would have felt still within character. But she doesn't really have anything to say about it. She shows up like sort of in the middle of their back and forth and hears enough to know what's going on there and doesn't seem to have any problem with it at all. And I was sort of surprised. I expected her to take exception. Seems like she just doesn't, it just doesn't faze her. I don't know. I thought she'd say something. But anyway, so he is sort of predisposed to not really like Raphael. And thus, the fact that he gets along with Michael super, super well in this episode feels like it's going to wind up being sort of a thing. And I've talked before about how I haven't really been in this position, but, you know, we had a scene where Jane's mom is sort of taking Michael's side a little bit. And I know she doesn't see it that way, and maybe it isn't even really that way, but she says he was part of our family for 2 years, and it's really hard to just, like, move on without him. And I was saying, I have never been in the position where I have dumped somebody or been broken up with by somebody that my family really liked and were vocal about their regret that we're no longer together. I have always been kind of private with my relationships, honestly, in regard to my family knowing people. I have never been a big family person. And so my parents didn't factor in too much in any of my relationships. However, I know that there are people out there for whom, if you don't get along with the family, then I'm sorry, this just isn't going to work out. And to be fair, I haven't dated anybody who just didn't get along with my family either. Like, if they didn't, maybe that would be an issue. But the idea of your family being like, dumping them was a mistake, or I can't believe you fucked it up and she dumped you kind of thing. Like, that is a sort of dynamic that feels like it would be really difficult. And the fact that Jane has already run into that with Zoe, I'm really, really worried about the fact that Rogelio is starting to be won over by Michael here. I feel like it has become very easy because of the way that the show has gone plot-wise. It's very easy to forget the way that Michael lied to Jane over and over again. And, you know, Rogelio just straight up doesn't know about that, because why would he? Because it's none of his business. And this is when you get into that sort of tricky thing where how much do you want to explain to the people in your life the details of what went on to get them to understand? And how much of that do you just have to say, you know what, that's none of your business and you need to trust me that I know what I'm doing? I'm saying all of this way ahead of time, though, because there has been no moment of Rogelio telling Jane she fucked up or anything like that. I'm just saying I'm sort of like on the lookout for it at this point, because what we have here, Michael has just given Jane the flyer about the writers group, and Rogelio, he's just there like wistful. And what happened earlier in the episode, a GIF got dropped. Everybody calls it a GIF, you guys, in this episode. Can we just, like, as an aside, no, never again. GIF only, forever, period, end of sentence. But it's a GIF of him holding his weapon incorrectly in this, like, you know, weird space soap opera that he's involved in, which honestly, we get to see the GIF and I don't see how he's holding it incorrectly, because that weapon makes no sense to me. But granted, and I feel like he was set up wrong to do it wrong, because if he's in that scene and props didn't correct him, I think that was purposeful. I think he was handed the weapon incorrectly, or somebody showed him how to hold it incorrectly on purpose for this moment to be captured by others. And he's very self-conscious about it. So he asks Michael, since Michael, you know, works in law enforcement and has a weapon, if he could shadow him. And Michael agrees. And I really love when Rogelio walks away all excited, Michael turns and looks at Jane with this like expression, and she says, "You're the one who said yes." And I was like, yeah, thank you. Because it's not like you advocated for your dad to go with him. It's just, he was weak in the moment. So then we have these scenes of Rogelio standing like right behind him as he's getting updates about some of the things in the case. And we find out that the like information that was on that thumb drive that they were given by Aaron. He said, something about it being encrypted, and we find out that it was just somebody's name. I'm going back to that scene just real quick to see exactly what it is that it says on there. They find anything else in the flash drive? No, just the name Tony Vaughn. And apparently that doesn't mean anything to the two of them. So Rogelio was like right behind Michael for this whole thing. And he says if Tony Vaughn's name is on the flash drive, he's got to be involved with Sin Rostro. And Vaughn has been off the grid forever. If he is, he's either at his mother's or his girlfriend's. And she says that she's going to go to his girlfriend's. Michael is going to head to the mother's, and Rogelio is sitting with him for this stakeout. And Rogelio is super not prepared for exactly how boring a stakeout is. It's only 20 minutes and he's already like whining about how bored he is and how hungry he is. And honestly, a stakeout sounds like the worst. Because the whole thing is you can't look at your phone, right? You've got to be paying attention. You can't just like get sucked into a comment thread. You just have to watch a door and wait for God knows how long. Like, yeah, that fucking sucks. But Rogelio is not a patient man. Michael keeps being like, well, maybe you should go then. Maybe you should leave. And Rogelio won't take that bait. But eventually Michael says something about how after a few hours, I'm going to get punchy and break out my impressions. And Rogelio lights up and says, I love impressions. Show me one. And Michael is really taken off guard. Like, it's just a very disarming thing to say something as if it's a bad thing and have the person react totally positively to it and like requesting the thing that you are trying to use as a threat. So he does, first of all, he does the impression of Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, which is actually really good. I'm not even going to play that one. He does an impression of a guy who is bitten by a lizard and then turns into one. Also excellent. Very, very well done. Like, I'm not even mad at that. Those are very good. And Rogelio is fucking delighted. He is so, like, he starts laughing so hard that he says something about how his laughter is going to draw attention to them and ruin their stakeout kind of thing. And I think he was right. Like, he needed to keep it down. So this whole scene is them kind of bonding. And Michael says something about how Jane said these were the worst. And Rogelio says Jane is magnificent, but she does not have the ear for comedy that I do. This leads to them seeing this guy pulling out of, down the street. They follow him and they wind up losing him, I think. Eventually, they catch up with him at Cayocho. And Michael is trying to keep eyes on him, but the place is very crowded. It's a mess. And he's having a hard time. Rogelio is asking, like, do you want a hot dog? I'm going to get myself a hot dog. And Michael's, like, clearly irritated about this fucking guy who won't just, sit back and let him do his job. But then Vaughn is in the crowd and Michael is having a lot of trouble kind of making his way over to him in time to keep him from leaving. And Rogelio, who is surrounded by fans trying to take selfies with him, spots Vaughn and uses his crew, his little entourage that he's got here, to stop the man by just saying, like, that's a bad guy, get him. And all of these people, it's mostly women, but there's a couple of dudes in there as well. They all, like, blockade this guy in place so that the cops can arrest him. And it's actually pretty great. Like, it's an unorthodox way of getting a bad guy, but it worked. And Rogelio was key. And he has something to be really proud of now. And he has a moment later with Michael where he says, my first case, and Michael says, and your last, with this like irritation in his voice. But then Aurelio says, and we caught the bad guy. And Michael kind of lets his whole attitude slip for a second, goes, we did catch the bad guy, and seems really pleased. So it's kind of cute. And Vaughn, it seems like he as a person doesn't really pay off very much. What Michael says eventually is just, all right, well, I guess we'll just nail him on drug charges and try and get him to flip, which is, you know, standard MO. But apparently Vaughn was like, they were wondering if he killed Roman, and he apparently has like an alibi for that. So he did not. And this is when he runs into his ex. And Andy, that's her name, Andy. And she had said to Jane earlier, I met my ex at Cayocho, so I like to come here and get a churro and wander around and kind of obsess about him a little bit. She runs into him and mentions that she's getting a churro, and he laughs and says, you always did like churros. And there's a sort of energy here of, I think he dumped her, and she is still obsessing over him because he's the one who got away. Very curious, like exactly what went down, but he still seems to have a little bit of affection in his voice when he's talking to her. Another thing I don't relate to, you know, like, I don't know if I ran into Brendan, if it would be quite the same. There is no other ex that I am friends with that I would meet and feel this sort of like spark with at all anymore. Like, just not going to happen. I have so outgrown those people. And Brendan, I feel like it wouldn't be this sort of energy. It would be more like, wow, how you doing? And genuine just curiosity, but not this. And I know this is a thing for a lot of people. You know, there's a whole joke about like, girl, don't drunk text your ex. I have never been tempted. Oh my God. I couldn't imagine even considering such a thing. But it's a joke because apparently a lot of people have sort of on again, off again things. Can't relate. So Andy being here and the fact that she like admits that she obsesses with her ex, about her ex. Does she know that Jane is his ex at all? Would she have said that if she knew Jane also dated him? I'm going to go ahead and say she knows. But I would kind of like it more if it was a coincidence, just because if she knows and she came here for Jane, that makes her a little bit obsessive in a way that I'm not like happy and excited about. But I mean, she literally used the word obsess over my ex to Jane. So if she's prepared to use that word herself, I have to assume it's even worse than she's saying. I'm just very, very curious to find out what happened between the two of them, why they broke up, what her personality is like, whether she knows about Jane, what she thinks about Jane and Michael breaking up. Was she following the fact that he had been engaged? Like, I assume if she knows, she's swooping in because of their breakup. She gave it a couple weeks or a couple months or whatever it is. And now she's like, all right, now my time is here and I'm going to try again. But yeah, so it sort of just like ends with the two of them looking at each other. And there's like a montage of the two of them and then Zoe and Alba walking past each other and Raphael coming and sitting next to Jane and explaining about like his reasons for wanting to get married so quickly and trying to lock it down and everything. And then the very, very final scene, he has said to Jane how he never even tried to look for his mom. And he always took for granted that his father was telling the truth, that his mother didn't want to be found. And he was trying to respect that desire because for him, it was probably like, if she doesn't want me, then I don't want her. Fuck her, you know? But Jane reminds him, my mom told me a lot of stuff, and she's a really good person who meant well, but she was full of shit. She lied over and over again. So maybe you should check into this a little bit more. And we have him at the computer he's standing there as Jane comes and brings him like a cup of coffee, and he's looking really anxious. And the narrator says sometimes romance isn't about big gestures, it's about small, intimate moments. And he says to Jane, you think I should do this, right? And she says, I would, which I like that answer, you know? And he types his mother's name into his favorite search engine. Elena Dinola is her name. Ziggle search is what it's called on this. It's so funny. And the narrator says, don't look for things that you're not prepared to find. So I'm super curious what we're going to find out about Elena Dinola. I want to say here as well, again, Raphael has this moment of anxiety and looking really uncertain. And I find him so attractive when he looks anything other than cool and collected. It's wild, the transformation for me. When he is his collected self, there's just arrogance that sort of pours off him. And then these moments where he is really vulnerable and showing extreme excitement, like when their kid turns out to be okay, or sadness, or when he tells her, I love you, or when he asks her to move in with him. All of these moments of like extreme emotion, it clicks for me. And I'm like, oh yeah, wow. Yeah, he really is gorgeous. And then he goes back to his sort of resting bitch face position. And I'm just like, ugh, no. It is really such a change. And I don't think I've ever seen an actor that I've gone that back and forth with before. But I appreciate at least that there are moments where I can see it, because not seeing it at all is always a little bit of a bummer, because you feel so disconnected from the sense of attraction that the main character is feeling, you know? But yeah, I'm real interested to see what the deal is with his mom and what this guy, Vaughn, like why his name was in that chip, because he seems to be like not that important after all. But that name was like the only thing on the flash drive. Is it? Or is it like so encrypted that it wasn't immediately noticeable? Like, are there layers? Is what I'm asking. And I guess we'll find out. All right. Well, I have to wrap this up. But thank you guys very much for hanging out in the chat with me. And thank you to Lauren for commissioning this episode. I appreciate you all so much. Really looking forward to the next one. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.